Amen. Thanks, God. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Good. You can come down just a little bit, Carly. I'm going to keep on talking to you. I don't want to hurt you up there. There you go. Okay, cool. All right, so Scott, just a little bit more, because I might get loud sometimes. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, as Scott said, my name is Candice, and because I have the privilege of having the mic, I'm not going to introduce myself first. I want to get to know you all first. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So if you all have a phone on you, please, can you pull it out for a second? And I want you to go either scan this QR code or go to answerbycolor.com. And what's going to happen is I'm going to ask a series of questions, and your response to the question is going to be indicated by a color. Okay? I'm good? You got it? All right, so once you're at answerbycolor.com, hold your phone up and let me just see. Let me see what you see, the other part. Yep. All right, now click on any color you want. Click on any color you want. Now hold it up. Okay, this is how this is. Okay, a lot of people like blue. A lot of people really like blue. If you did not like blue, then you're kind of an outsider right now because everyone else likes blue. Now, at the top left-hand corner, you're going to see a back button. Go back, and that's how this game is played. You got it? All right, so the first question is this your first time at a ground zero training? Red is yup. Green is nope. Green is nope. Okay. You can hold it up. Let's see. Hold it up and let's see your response. Okay, not a lot of first-timers. Okay, cool. But there are some. Welcome. It's my first time, too. All right, we're going to get this. Anyone have a birthday today? A birthday today? Yes, today's my birthday. No. No, I was reading. Okay, some birthday months. My son's birthday is on Wednesday. So, yeah, he'll be 10. Yeah. Double digits. So, okay, real quick. Is double digits a big deal? I think so, too. My husband's like, no. So that's a point of tension in our house right now because I like celebrating everything, and he's just like, whatever. But I'm like, 10, this is a big deal. We're going to go all out. And he's like, you're tripping, Candace. But guess who's going to win? Me. All right. Where did you grow up? South Carolina? Uh-huh. In the States, but not South Carolina. Another country. Okay. All right. Did you attend church as a teenager? If you don't have a phone, could you just thumbs up or thumbs down? Yes, occasionally. Only for holidays, yes. Okay. True or false? I had an adult other than my parents or guardians helping me navigate faith as a teenager. Okay. All right. This worked very well earlier. It's acting crazy now. Okay. Did I skip one? Oh, yeah. How connected do you feel to the teenagers you serve? How connected do you feel to the teenagers that you serve? Somewhat connected, okay. Completely, okay. How much do you feel like you get teenagers? So this is more like an understanding. How much do you feel like you understand them? I completely get them. I remember what it was like for me as a teenager, so I get them some. I don't get or understand teenagers at all. Okay. This next question is about how you feel like you can relate to teenagers. So when I say relate, I mean your experience is similar to their experience. Relate. I can completely relate. I relate a bit. Not at all. Their world is completely different. Okay. How long have you worked with teenagers? Someone said besides mine. You can count your years as parents. Those absolutely count. Okay. Okay. Almost done, almost done. Now let's shift over to talking a little bit about their parents. How much do you feel like you can relate to their parents or their caretaker? I can relate completely. I can somewhat relate, not at all. Their world or life is so different from anything I've experienced. I don't know them, so I can't say. Okay. All right. Last, how connected do you feel to their parents or caretaker? Completely connected, somewhat connected, or completely disconnected? Okay. Cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So a little bit about me. So I was born and raised, I live in Atlanta currently, and this is my family. My husband, Max, and I've got 2 children. My family is not one of those families that takes a lot of family pictures, so every time I try to go find a family picture for this, we're not the family with the matching outfits posing out in the fall weather and the leaves. That's not us, okay? You catch us at a sporting event. Both of these are sporting events, right? For Easter, we probably have on like some kind of, some people are dressing up for Easter. Yeah, it's hard. We don't. We do it a little bit, but that's not us with the nice family photos. These are actually kind of old, a little bit old, but my son Mason turns 10 on Wednesday. My daughter Addison is 7. We call her Sunny. Only people call her Addison are the people who really don't know her well, but we call her Sunny. And my husband Max, we've been married for 12 years now, and I've been in youth ministry since 2006, and I have served in youth ministry throughout the Southeast. So as far south as Miami and as far north as Atlanta. And I currently work at Orange as an youth ministry coaching consultant. So my days are spent talking to people who serve within youth ministry and just being on Zoom a lot of on Zoom, right? Because you can't look at somebody like this on Zoom. Like your face that you're making right now, that would not work on Zoom, okay? That would not work on Zoom. Zoom, you've got to, because people are looking different. It's oh gosh, it's so exhausting. But I love the work and I love the conversations that I'm able to have with people. It's just youth ministry. It just looks a lot different. My husband also works with youth, and I oftentimes tell my husband that he has a greater advantage into the lives of teenagers than what I have ever had as a youth pastor because my husband is an educator and a coach, right? So he coaches football. They're out there based on a common interest, a common desire, going after a common goal. So his starting place and entry into their lives looks completely different than people showing up to a certain place at a certain time just to be a part of a program in a ministry, right? And he also is an educator. So he teaches 12th graders, so those who are at the very end of their journey. And at this point in the school year, everybody gets senioritis and nobody wants to show up. But he's there teaching them what? Personal finance and economics. Yes, you get it, right? You get it. And I think personal finance and economics is one of those classes that is so essential. And the students that he teaches are so blessed to have the opportunity to get that in 12th grade. But guess what they do? They don't understand how important it is to start off life in a certain kind of way financially. They just don't understand it. They're just not there yet. And one of the things that my husband constantly says is this: it only matters when it matters. He's like, well, it only matters to them when it matters. That's why some of us fall asleep. But we operate like that too, right? That's why we fall asleep on an airplane when they're given the instructions, right, about the safety. We don't always pay attention to that because, listen, I'm flying over land. Why are you telling me that my seat is a flotation device? It's not relevant for me right now, right? Am I going to really give me a parachute? Tell me about the parachute that's hidden in these seats as I'm flying over land, then we can have a conversation, right? But some things, it only matters when it matters. That's why some of us, now I don't know how many of y'all are subscribed to Old Navy's emails. I am. They send you emails all the time. And they always have a sale. They always got something going on, but they email you all the time. And unless you're in the market for some cargo pants or some shirts, guess what? You ignore it, and it looks like this. This is what my email inbox looks like. My husband's like, I don't know how yours looks like this. This would drive me berserk. I'm like, it's just deals and stuff that I'm not in the market for. But if I'm heading to Old Navy, what am I going to do? Go to my inbox, search Old Navy, and see what the current deals are. So when I go to the counter, bam. It only matters when it matters, right? That's why some people, when it comes to the end of the movie, what do? We walk out when the credits start rolling. Because unless you got a loved one whose name is in those credits or your name is in those credits, movie's over, it's time to go. Because it only matters when it matters, right? Y'all understand what I'm saying? We operate like this all the time in our day-to-day lives. That's what so many of us do. And so we need to make sure that we're not guilt-tripping teenagers as they navigate the world too, because guess what? Many teenagers, if we can click, many teenagers think the same thing, that things only matter when it matters. So we, as their leaders, have got to be really, really careful the way that we navigate and we engage them. This conversation today for each one of us, it is a call to not forget. A call to not forget what it was like when we were their age. A call to not forget what it was like when you were entering 6th grade and you were in middle school for the very first time. And your life is changing, your body is changing, your emotions are changing, you're thinking differently. This is a call to not forget what those feelings felt like when you went from being at the top of the food chain at the school back to the bottom. This is a call to not forget what it was like as an 11th grader. And you're starting to taste a little bit more freedom, a little bit closer to being an quote-unquote adult, right? And trying to figure out what is next for me in a different kind of way because you're getting closer and closer. This is a call to not forget what it was like when you were in the 12th grade and you were taking those cap and gown pictures and you were preparing to graduate. And you were at this point in your life and you started getting senioritis too. So do we judge them for getting senioritis? Or do we be like, man, me too. I remember I did not want to show up to school. It was so hard, but I went anyway. If you did, you could say that. If you didn't go, say, I didn't go. But I wouldn't recommend you do that, right? This is a call to not forget those things. Because the truth is, if we really want to influence the faith of future generations, we have to get really good at understanding how to speak to them. And really good at understanding how to engage them so that we can build bridges of connection and not barriers of disconnection. Y'all follow what I'm saying? You get it? So over the course of our time together today, here's what it is that we're going to talk through. This first session, we're going to dive into just understanding the middle school and high school phase and just talk about middle school and high schoolers. And then the second session, we're going to talk about how to make it personal. Right? How to make it personal. What are some essential questions that we ask in order to develop these personal relationships with a teenager? And then we're going to talk about creating a safe space. So once you understand phase, right, the phase of who they are developmentally and what's happening in their brains and in their worlds, then how you make it personal with them. When you start making it personal and engaging them in certain conversations, certain things are going to come up inevitably, right? So how do you create that safe space and engage those challenging conversations when they come up? And then we're going to do some scenarios, right? But first, what I want you to do is you all should have some scenario cards in front of you. And I'll walk through that a little bit. So each of you should have a scenario. It might be there you go. I see you all pulling it out, right? So I want you all to take a few minutes and just read it. Because don't read it yet. Just listen for a second. So some people are still reading. It's okay, because I guess what? I'd be that one still reading it too, because I can read and listen at the same time. Don't tell me I can't. Seriously. So In a second, I want you to take some time to read it, right? Read the scenario at the top and then read the 2 questions. And as I go through these different sessions, if you hear something that sparks how you would engage a teenager based on this scenario in response to either one of those questions or maybe even something else you might come up with, I want you to jot it down, because when we get to session 4, we're going to have some conversation around how we put all of this to practice, okay? There should be 5 scenario cards that are out. Everyone has something different, so you all can independently use just, everyone doesn't need to do every scenario. Just do the one that's in front of you, and then later on we'll talk through some of them. I'm going to give you a few minutes to just kind of read through that, and once y'all are done, just look up here so I'll know that y'all are ready. So first, let's talk about the middle school and high school phases. Now, I work for an organization, and we took some time a few years ago to develop what we call the Phase Project. And if anyone, want to hear more about that, I'm happy to share some more information with you all offline. But the Phase Project. And the Phase Project was because, hey, we've realized that if we really want to get good, like I said earlier, at influencing the faith of the next generation, then we need to really just understand developmentally where they're coming from. So we talked to counselors, educators, parents, those within all different settings that work with children and with youth. And we did some research too, and we tried to understand developmentally what's happening in the lives of children and youth. And then also, how does that inform their faith life, right? So let's look, when we say phase, so phase sometimes has a negative connotation, right back a little bit. Phase sometimes has a negative connotation. Some parents will say, oh, it's just a phase when you think about the toddler years or the middle school, the teenage years when they're kind of getting a little bit disconnected and moody. Oh, it's just a phase, right? Phase can have a negative connotation, but what we try to do is take a spin on that, right? It's just a phase, so don't miss it. Right? Don't miss those short windows, those moments that you really have to influence them right where they are. So a phase is a time frame in a kid's life when you can leverage distinct opportunities to influence their future. Those distinct opportunities is what we're going to be talking about today. So what are the things that are distinctive to a teenager? Now, I was talking to my husband about this because, he's, like I said, he's an educator, spends lots of time with teenagers, and I was telling him, when it comes to the different contexts that people grow up in, a lot of these questions are the same, but the way that they go about answering them is just a little bit differently, based on the settings that they live in, the things that they've been exposed to, and the things that they feel like are possible for their lives. I was having a conversation with my sister that's totally a sidebar, but last night she and I were talking. She's also an educator. Lots of educators around me. She's also an educator, and she was saying that they had a conversation within their school just yesterday, and they were talking about how some families, especially families of color, sometimes instill the importance of education so much on their kids because they feel like, hey, education is how you advance in life. So if you know this, then you know how to do this, and you can do this, and therefore your potential is a lot greater. So sometimes families of color, especially middle-class families of color, sometimes they'll instill education on their kids, and they'll forsake the opportunity for kids to wonder, right? Because they don't think, hey, no, we don't have to stop, because you got to understand the black and white, the facts of certain things, so that you know how to navigate this world that we're living in, right? So what are the different ways that teenagers have taken the questions that we're going to talk today and have lived them out in their lives in order to really figure out how to propel into the future and how to have a life that's sustainable, right? Some of these things are generational, that are passed down from their parents to them. Some things are done consciously, unconsciously, but the way that a lot of teenagers will respond to these questions in huge part is influenced by the things that have the circumstances that have been put around them. So let's look at the middle school phase. The middle school phase, this is when the middle schoolers think like engineers, right? They think like engineers, and engineers spend a lot of time trying to solve problems by connecting concepts to see how they work together. These middle school years are years when the teenagers' brains start developing at a rate comparable to how their brains were developing when they were toddlers. So middle schoolers are kind of off the edge a little bit because their brains are advancing at a really, really rapid pace. But as their brains are advancing, they're able to think in different ways. So let's talk about some of the ways that they're thinking, the questions that they're asking. Sixth graders are asking the question, who do I like and who likes me? Who do I like? and who likes me. And not always in any kind of dating relationship kind of way. So, we're not mean like that. I mean like who likes me as a person? And who do I like as a person? Who do I want to be around? So the middle schooler, sixth grader needs acceptance. They're seeking acceptance a whole lot. And they're trying to figure out, where do I fit in socially? And if we can give them acceptance and we can recognize them for who they are and accept them, then what that does is it helps them to gain stability in their life. Helps them to gain stability. And then we have 7th and 8th graders, and these years are kind of coupled together. 7th and 8th grade years, they're asking the question of, who am I? This is kind of a serious identity question. Asking the question of, who am I? These are the years when middle schoolers need affirmations a whole lot. So our accolades to them need to go from being more general to more, that's my timer, I need to be quiet? Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. So this is when when the accolades that we give them need to go from being more general to more specific, right? Because they're not necessarily thinking as black and white as they once were. They're seeing more the gray and the nuance of life. So they need to know, hey, what you did in that moment was awesome, and give an example. Or I love the way that you ask questions when we're sitting down together. You process really, really well. So what are the things that you see in them, and how can you give them that praise and those accolades and those affirmations? Because when we give them affirmations, what happens is they're able to discover their uniqueness and how they are set apart from all of their peers. Because remember, they're asking, who am I? And this question of who am I is an identity question. So we got to help them to understand their uniqueness. These who questions that middle schoolers are asking, they're resolved. When they're resolved, we help them to affirm their personal journey, affirming their personal journey, their individual journey. Remember, they're going from thinking really, really black and white to understanding how things come together. So they're living in a lot more gray, and they understand the nuance of life a lot differently. So when we affirm their personal journey, then we set them up to be better able to carry out their faith differently. Why? We help them to own their faith and to value their faith community. Because when they're able to own their faith, as they're affirming their faith, I'm mixing this up. affirming their personal journey helps them to own their faith, because they realize how they are made in their uniqueness and how God individually made them, how God made them. So that affirms their faith journey. And then also helps them to value a faith community, because their faith community helped them to discover who they are and help to give them praises based on who they are. Am I making sense? Yeah? If I'm not, just raise your hand. Like, Candice, you're throwing me off. I know I got a little tripped up for a second, but if I'm throwing you off, just let me know. When we help a middle schooler mature in their relationship with God, here's how we do that, right? When a middle schooler, these are the things that are probably going to happen because they're thinking like engineers and they're connecting dots differently, right? We can help them to connect the dots. That's what we can do. Help them to realize that, hey, the Bible is one continuous story from Genesis to Revelation. It's not just like a story here and a story there, and it's a story. Help them to understand how the story goes from Genesis to Revelation. Also, during those years, we can expect a crisis. Because as they're thinking, more gray, and they're seeing more nuance, they're asking questions of theodicy a whole lot. Well, how could a good God do this? Or how can this happen? They're starting to really question the things that they're seeing and experiencing within faith and in the world. They're putting those things together, and they're connecting those dots. So they might have some kind of a faith crisis, and maybe not necessarily a huge crisis, but they might start asking questions about some things that they never asked before. And then also we can help them mature in their relationship with God is by being consistent. Through being consistent. Nothing that we say to a middle schooler or any teenager for real matters if we don't have that consistent credibility that we gain by consistently showing up. I'm going to say that one more time. Nothing that we say matters if we don't have the credibility of consistently showing up. Just because we're talking about God when they show up does not give us an automatic right into somebody's life. We have to earn that. But I think y'all already know that, right? We have to earn that. Now let's talk a little bit about high schoolers. High schoolers, they think like philosophers. They think like philosophers. High schoolers want to discover meaning and learn best by processing out loud. That meaning and processing out loud. Remember, they're at if you look at the leg of your formative years, they're at the last leg of this race. So they're trying to figure out meaning. What does it mean for me as I'm continuing on this journey and going out into the quote-unquote real world? So in ninth grade, they're asking the question of where do I belong? So this is when communities and friendships start shifting a little bit for some teenagers. Because some of the communities that you used to be a part of, and I say communities in the sense of like social circle communities, social circle friendship groups, those, they start changing a lot in high school. And here's why, because at one point, and there's some things that kids might have liked as they were growing up, but in ninth grade, that's when you start being a part of different things within your school, right? You get to school a whole lot more. Like a lot of schools have more club opportunities. They have more sporting opportunities to be a part of, more extracurricular things to be a part of than what your middle school might have had. So social circles are starting to change a whole lot. So a friend group that you might have had, they might have had when they were in middle school, might look completely different by the time they get in high school because the communities and the social circles that they're swinging in based on interest are completely different. So if a ninth grader says something to the effect of, I don't have any friends anymore, my friends aren't the same anymore, and they're kind of having a big upset about that, like we can't just brush them off. Oh, you just friends for a year, it's not a big deal. But that's a big deal. When your body is changing, and your emotions are changing, and you're thinking differently, and then the people in the circles around you are changing, it has the potential to create a major crisis. A major crisis, so we can't brush them off. The best thing that we can do is provide them connection. Help them connect them with other people so that they can find some sort of a community. And that's what it creates. We help them value community when we do the work of helping them to find someone, maybe to be a friend, or connect them with other people. Honestly, a faith community like this is one of those places where a teenager should be able to show up and be accepted regardless of interest, regardless of any of those things, that like athletic ability, none of that stuff should matter when they come into this place. And that's what we have the potential to give to teenagers as they enter high school. And then when you get into 10th grade, they start asking the question, why should I believe? Why should I believe? So when a teenager starts pushing back a little bit on some of the things that we might be saying, when it comes to faith and God and religion. What they don't need is patented answers. What they don't need is to be told what to believe. What they need is adults who will listen carefully and respond with questions. Not necessarily listening with the ears of trying to answer a question, but what would it look like to answer their question with a question? Understanding how they got to that place. Answering questions with the question, because the truth of the matter is, if you can help a teenager to formulate their own language, because sometimes teenagers can't necessarily articulate what it is that they're feeling and they're experiencing. So when they can't necessarily articulate it, sometimes they just may say a question based on a feeling. But when you're forced to put those feelings into words, it forces you to develop a language around that feeling. And the more questions that you ask them helps them to develop more language around that feeling. And the more language they have around that feeling, the better they're able to get to a certain resolve. And when they have more language around a feeling and they get to a certain resolve, they're better positioned to articulate their faith. Am I making sense? Yeah? And what we want is teenagers to be able to articulate their faith. Because when they can articulate their faith, they own their faith differently. They don't just believe something because so-and-so at ground zero told me to believe something. They believe it because they went through the process and the experience of being able to communicate it and articulate it, and they know this to be true. So when things happen in the world, they're standing on a faith that, okay, I get this. I understand this. This is what we can give to teenagers in high school. We do all that. We help them to clarify their values. And then we get to 11th grade. And they're trying to figure out, how can I matter? How can I matter? And let me just pause for a second. Now, these questions at these grades are generalizations, right? I'm not saying that every 11th grader is asking this question and that 10th graders are not asking this question. And I'm not saying that 12th graders are not asking this question. I'm not. But based on the journey of life and when you're looking at, hey, you're getting closer towards adulthood, these are kind of how we're categorizing some of these questions. Follow? And remember also lived experience plays a major role in how these questions are played out and when teenagers start asking some of these questions. But 11th grade, we're looking at, how can I matter? How can I matter? Sometimes we tell people about the story of God without telling them of how they fit into the story of God. I remember being in church growing up and coming into church. My grandfather was a pastor and always trying to peek around. I went to a really traditional church as a kid. A lot of different churches I went to, but the one we always came back to was my grandfather's church. My mom would get mad about something that happened, and we would go somewhere else for like a year, and then we would come back to my grandfather's church, and then my mom would get mad about something else, or discover a brand new church that's doing amazing things, and we would go over there for like a year or two, and then we would always come back to my grandfather's church. So if I ever say my church that I grew up at, it's probably my grandfather's church, because that was always home ground. But I remember always going into church as a kid and looking, trying to see, the big lectern, the pulpit where the pastor preaches from, trying to look around and see who's sitting in the big chair today, right? Because whoever was sitting in the big chair was the one preaching. I never saw myself sitting in a big chair. Never. Never, ever in my life would I have ever imagined that I'll be sitting in a big chair. And I remember the first time I sat in a big chair before I preached my initial sermon, I thought back to being a kid and looking around at who and wondering who will be in the big chair. And then now I'm sitting in the big chair. And I wonder if there were ways that we can give teenagers ways of seeing themselves doing different things, utilizing their gifts within the faith community or utilizing their gifts for God is a way of letting them have a vision for their life that they can lean on and they can aspire towards. Because if someone has a vision for their life, then the way that they walk and they move and the things that they'll do and not do just look a little bit different when you know where you're going, right? Not to say you're not going to make any mistakes, not to say you're not going to make any left turns when you should have gone right or right turns when you should have gone left, or not to say you're not going to sit down when you should be running or sprinting. I'm not saying that, but it gives you something to aim towards. So with 11th graders, what they need is opportunities to lead and to serve, utilizing their gifts by doing more than just setting up chairs, right? If you know that as a teenager who has a personality, let me pick on you for a second. What's your name? Shanoa. Say it again? Shanoa. Shanoa, you have this smile, and I keep looking at you because it just warms me standing right here, right? Pause for a second, how did that make you feel, me saying that? Happy, right? It still happens with us adults. If someone says something about you uniquely and who you are, and it gives you praises for that, it still makes us feel good, right? But if I were to say to you, Shanoa, hey, that joy that you have, the joy that I have, the world really didn't give it to you. It's deep within you, right? Maybe, I don't know you well, but it just seems happy. You need to take that and spread that within your workplace, within your community. Make sure you offer that to other people, right? And maybe a prayer that you pray as you walk out is, God, help me to figure out how to share my joy with the world. And if I were to give you that instruction, or an 11th grader that instruction, then it gives them a different kind of purpose when they walk out of their house in the morning and they know, hey, my goal right now is to show, I've got this joy. Candice told me I got some joy I need to share with the world. So how can I share this joy with the world? And every morning I need to be praying, God, show me different ways of to share my joy with the world. And you never know what it can become. Whether it can be just a smile that a teenager might have, or whether it's a unique skill that they might be able to, that they display. Am I making sense? Yeah? Okay. And what it does is it helps them to refine their skills. Helping them to refine their skills. 12th grade. What will I do? A lot of times when teenagers are getting ready to graduate, 12th graders are getting ready to graduate, we ask them, what do you want to, or even with kids too, what do you want to be when you grow up? These are questions that we ask a lot. What do you want to be when you grow up? Right? You know we ask them the question, right? But I wonder what might happen if we, instead of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up, we ask them, what kind of person do you want to be? When you're 25, what kind of person do you want to be? When you're 35, what kind of person do you want to be? When you're 55, what kind of person do you want to be? And some of them might not be able to envision their lives that far out. But when you start asking them those poignant questions like that, about not necessarily what you want to do professionally, but what kind of person do you want to be, it helps them to think about their future differently and their impact in the world in a different kind of way. And it helps them to realize, hey, the future is so much bigger than just what I'm going to do professionally, what kind of job I'm going to have. So when we encourage these experiences, right, encouraging experiences of using their gifts, using their gifts and being a part of the world and experiencing all the things that the world has and putting themselves in that, what we do is help to create a vision for their life. These questions that high schoolers asking, the where, why, how, and what. We resolve a high schooler's relational questions by mobilizing their potential. Mobilizing their potential. I don't know how to say that differently. Mobilizing their potential. We help them to see what they can do. Help them to see their faith in action. And this affects the communities they work to be a part of. So when you have a certain vision, and your potential is mobilized, and you have a vision for your life, the communities that you seek to be a part of don't always look a certain kind of way. The communities that I professionally seek to be a part of, or even personally seek to be a part of today, look a whole lot different than the communities that I sought to be a part of as a kid. Because the communities that I sought to be a part of as a kid were more about survival and trying to fit in, or even try to blend in and fall to the back. But when God gives you a vision for your life, or you're starting to develop and understand where it is that you fit into God's broader story and how you can use your gifts, then the communities and the things that you seek to be a part of are different. This is one of those, a response to that when I said earlier that my husband and I were talking about these questions, and a lot of these questions are the same, but the way that people go about answering them based on their context and their experience looks different. Sometimes when you're asking a high school, when the high schooler is asking, what will I do, right? Or when the high schooler is asking the question, how can I matter, right? Some of these questions might be answered differently based on context. What neighborhoods they live in, the things that they see. But yet when we help them to have vision and we mobilize their potential, the way that they start answering those questions have the potential to shift. And when we mobilize their potential, we help a high schooler keep pursuing their authentic faith because they realize how they play a part in that broader story and they discover their personal mission. So if we want to help a high schooler mature in their relationship with God, this is what it looks like. Give an application. This week, you need to do this. Today, when you get home, do this, right? Or what do you think you can do this week? What do you think you can do today? Give them an application, or have them to come up with their own application of how they can apply whatever it is you're talking about. Ask a question. We need to get good at asking more questions than having more answers. And I know sometimes it's like, oh, ask them, but they're asking me, and I just want to, and you cannot say you can't answer questions. But sometimes it's beneficial to help them to get to that place and understanding of the answer independently. And then make it experiential. Help them to see what they can do. What can I do with what it is that I have? How can I serve? What does it look like for me to put my faith into action? So I think that's it for, where's my phone? 9:55. All right, let's take a break. A little bit behind. I think I might have known that. We're a little bit behind. Let's take a break, and we will jump back in at, how long are our breaks supposed to be? 15 minutes, is it? Yeah? Let's take a 15-minute break. So come back in here. I'm not a mathematician. It's 9:55. Someone tell me what 15 is. 10, 10? 10, 10? Yes? Okay, I instantly looked at you. Are you good at math? I instantly looked at you. I just felt like you would know. Let's come back at 10:10, all right? For this next conversation, we're going to be talking about how to make it personal with teens. How to make it personal with teens. Now, when I asked you all the question earlier of how many of you all had an adult other than your parents or caretaker who were an influence in your faith growing up, first I just want to take a second to just say that the work that you all are doing by showing up here for this and showing up for teenagers is phenomenal. Because that is so important. It really, really is. And the more adults that we can put in the lives of teenagers, then the greater ability that a teenager has to grow up with a lifelong faith. Because they have other people that they can come to, right? And we can't control the people who feel connected to us. We can't control the people who feel safe with us, right? And sometimes it might be a teenager who feels connected to you or is safe with you. And the way that you show up week after week gives them a place of safety. It gives them a place of hope and encouragement, and it helps to motivate them in life. I've shared this a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I grew up in D.C. in the 80s and the 90s, at the peak of the crack cocaine epidemic, and when D.C. was the murder capital. In the 18 years I lived there, I lived 17 different places, hopping around from place to place because I was raised by a single mother. My father was definitely in my life. Probably to a fault sometimes. He got on my nerves. But he was absolutely in my life. But my parents were divorced, and I lived with my mom. And she was a single parent and had a hard time providing us a stable life. And so for the adults that showed up, this right here is my high school cheerleading coach. She was one of those adults who showed up for me and who recognized through her consistently showing up. Hey, I never said to her, hey, this is what's happening in my life. It would be one of those, she would take me home after practice. And she would be heading to one house. I'm like, oh, wait, I live over here now. And she's like, okay. And she would just take me there. And then, oh, I live over here now. She's like, okay. And after several times, she's like, why y'all moving around so much? And it's through being in someone's life consistently that you're able to recognize those patterns and recognize those things that are happening and be able to step in and provide. Maybe you can connect with their parents, maybe you can. And if you can't connect with the parents, maybe you can provide some sort of a stability and safety for that child or that teenager. Because one of the reasons, here's the reason why. I love working in youth ministry because you have no idea what the kids or the teens that you're working with are going to grow up to become. You have no clue who they're going to be. And if I can play just a small part, and I can know that, hey, one day somebody's going to stand on the stage and have my picture up there, right? They might not have my picture up there. Who knows, right? But if I know that I could play a part in one portion of their life to help to advance them into that place, then my God, that's an awesome thing. That is a phenomenal thing, to know that you're able to sow a seed into someone's life like that. So I commend each of you for the work that you all do and the time that you take out of your schedules to show up. And even showing up here on a Saturday when you could have been sleeping in, but you decided to show up here to be a part of this. So today, in this portion, we're going to talk about making it personal. So I want to ask you all this. Who was that person for you? Just think about, did you have someone or did you not? And remember how it felt to have somebody, or remember how it felt to not have somebody. And recognize what you have the potential to provide this to a teenager. You see, we believe within the organization that I work, and I also personally just believe this, that making ministry personal is not just the best way to do ministry, it's the only way. It's the only way. I don't know how you can do ministry without making it personal, because it is a very, very personal thing. Understanding someone's life, understanding how your world collides with their world and how you all can journey forward together is a very, very personal thing. Some of you all might have heard the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Some of you may not have, right? But for this next portion, we're going to talk about Zacchaeus, the tax collector. And I'll read a few verses for you for a second. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner?" But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." We're going to talk about this right here. Everybody needs somebody who sees them the way that Jesus saw Zacchaeus. Everybody needs them. Needs someone to see them like that. Everybody needs somebody to see them like that. There's so many parallels in this story of Zacchaeus and with teenagers and what they're experiencing. Because we just talked about that teenagers are asking a lot of questions about identity, purpose, and belonging. In Zacchaeus, this story is about those things too. I want to go back through this story for just a second. Jesus engaged Zacchaeus in a way that gave him a new sense of identity, purpose, and belonging. That's what Jesus did for him. Jesus communicated in a way that reclaimed Zacchaeus' value. He reclaimed his value when he called him by name. He knew his name, reclaiming his value. And not just a tax collector who'd been stealing money from people, who had been a thief. He was Zacchaeus. Jesus communicated to his need, but Jesus knew what mattered to him. He knew that money was a motivating factor in his life. He knew that he was really, really motivated by the greed of getting more and getting more and getting more. And he was able to speak directly to that. Jesus entered into Zacchaeus' world. He took the time to find out where he lived, stepping outside of Jesus' world and entering into Zacchaeus' world, entering into his context, entering into his space. And then Jesus responded in a way that removed Zacchaeus' shame. Jesus knew what he had done. But did he hang it over his head? Did he beat him down about it? Jesus knew what he did. But he responded in a way that removed his shame about it. And then Jesus believed in Zacchaeus' potential. He spoke directly to what he could do. So what that shifts us into is the big five. If you really want to get personal with a teenager, these 5 questions are things that will help to deepen our bond with the students that we lead and understand the why behind all those relational questions, right? Do you know my name? Do you know what matters to me? Do you know where I live? Do you know what I have done? And my favorite is, do you know what I can do? And that's the one that just inspires me so much. Because it's so easy to get caught up in seeing someone in the way that we see them and not think about what their potential is and what they can do. And I feel like that's what my cheerleader coach did for me. She saw my potential. She saw my life and didn't hang it over my head. She made me captain of the cheerleading team. She did that for me, gave me a sense of power and importance and value. Let's talk about these. Do you know my name? Here's how we lean into that, right? I want to have all of these up here for the most part, just so we can kind of, if you want to jot them down, you can. You don't necessarily really have to. I'm happy to send this over to you. I know you already have it. If you want to download it and share it with everyone, you can, okay? But say their name out loud. There's something about when you meet someone and you learn their name and you say it out loud, it helps you to remember it. I'm not great with names. I'm better with faces and stories, right? So one of the things that I try to do is try to learn someone's story a little bit, and it helps me to remember some parts of them. And I'll give you a nickname in a second. I will. But there's something about this, not necessarily having a nickname, but it's something about knowing actually their name and how to pronounce it and how to say it and the story behind their name. Why were they given this name? What does it mean to them? What does it mean to their family, right? And then we write their names down and we put it in a place where we can see it every day. And then when we pray their names frequently, oh my God, there's some power when we start praying people's names. When you pray their names out loud or just pray them in your heart, and when you see it written down, it helps you to remember them and feel more connected with them. So the next time that you see them, even when if you see them again in another 9 months, you're like, hey, and you're able to name them. Some power in that. And then there's do you know what matters to me? Do you know what matters to me? Now, this whole matter thing, sometimes Minecraft matters. Sometimes there's school, family, friend groups, 9 Square. There's some things, what matters to me. But let's put them together. Learning their names is a way to prove that they are worth remembering. But discovering interests, what matters to them, is a way to show that they are worth liking. Y'all see the difference there? Yeah, I'm worth remembering, but I'm also worth liking. There's great power in that. So do you know what matters to me? Pay attention to the clues. Sometimes teenagers would drop clues about things that matter to them. What are the clues that they're dropping, right? And how can you ask clarifying questions about different things that they're saying in order to really, really understand it? Now, I have a little cousin. His name is Jameer. He's 18, and that's my boy, y'all. I love me some Jameer, right? When I've talked to him, he sings, and he is a phenomenal singer. But out of nowhere, he gained this interest in classical music and so in singing opera. I'm like, well, we don't do opera in our family. How did you even get exposed to opera, Jameer? You grew up where I grew up. We don't listen to opera, right? But so asking those questions, not necessarily in a shaming kind of way, like, what in the world? This is phenomenal. He can sing in French, in German, and all these other languages. He sang for us at Christmas time with our family. He sang this song. No one knew what he was saying, but we were like, but you sure sound good singing it, right? But when I engaged Jameer around his interests, right? Now, I know nothing about classical music or singing opera. I know nothing about those things, right? But when I engage him in his interests and ask him, how did you learn to sing in a different language? Do you know anything about what is that process like for you? So really just diving deep into his world and his experience, then you can really understand the things that matter to him. And he loves singing opera so much that he was willing to learn how to navigate that world of learning a different language in order to sing in a different language. It's so amazing because he doesn't just know how to sing he doesn't just have the words memorized. He's learning the language, which is so dope. Know what they know. Who are they following on Instagram? What YouTubers do they think are important, right? Just go online and just check them out, right? Be like, whoo, what in the world? But not shaming them, but just experiencing it a little bit, knowing a little bit about what matters to them, and engage in what interests them. And then do you know where I live? There was one point in my life. I grew up in like I said, D.C., and one point we lived in some apartments, and I had a friend of mine's dad was dropping me off. Now, a lot of my friends, they always lived in like these, single family homes and, out in the suburbs and these nice houses, and I always would go over to their houses. They hadn't really come over to my house a lot, but we had gone to the movies or something one day, and one of my friends, I was in middle school, and I had been friends with his daughter since kindergarten, right? And so her dad was dropping me off after the movies, and I was kind of like, when we pulled up, I was a little bit embarrassed because I didn't live in these big old houses that like everyone other friends did, and I was like, when we pulled up to the house, I was like, all right, Mr. Young, thank you, bye, and I was trying to run out, and he's like, wait, I'm gonna walk you up, and I'm like, no, you don't have to walk me up, Mr. Young, because where we lived, we had to walk down like a little small alley to get to my building, right? So it wasn't like he pulled up right in front of it. It was like, hey, the parking lot is here. We got to walk down a little small alley to go upstairs. I lived in maybe the second or third building or something. I don't remember. So we get out, and I'm like, Mr. Young, you really don't have to do this. And he's like, no, I'm going to take you upstairs. It's good. Because I was ashamed of how he would look at where I live because I saw how he lived today, right? So we get out, and he sees the guys hanging out, and he's like, hey, how y'all doing? And he daps him up, and he keeps walking. And I'm like, oh, okay, Mr. Young, come on, And then we get there, and I get to the front door of the building. I'm like, all right, thank you. I can go up myself. He's like, no, I'm gonna make sure you get in the house. And I was just like, Mr. Young, you don't have to. And he's like, no, make sure you get in the house. I'm like, okay. And I'm hesitantly walking up the stairs, right? Because I knew our house was a mess. We didn't keep it clean. Right? It was gonna be junky. So I was embarrassed that Mr. Young was gonna see my junky house, right? I can laugh about it now because it's funny now. Then I was like sweat and wreck. So we walked into the house, and he sees my mom, and he goes and gives her a hug. Because remember, he's known her since I was in kindergarten. I'm in late middle school at this point. He goes and gives my mom a hug and has a conversation. Then he leaves like, all right, I'll see you next time. He leaves, and I was just like, oh, man. He was actually pretty cool about it. He didn't make a big deal about it. He just entered into my world, into my space, and was so cool. And he gained so many more cool points by the way that he just appeared to just comfortably enter into my space. And I love that about him. So when you ask the question of, do you know where I live? When you enter into someone's world, it helps you to understand them a little bit different. What are the things that they're seeing every day? What are they exposed to? What is their home life like? When you are comfortable in someone else's context, you send a powerful message of acceptance. It shows acceptance. Because a lot of teenagers, they can't control where they live. Can they? Can they? I know my kids live where I tell them to live, right? They can't always control. They might run away, go live somewhere else. But they can't always control it. Do you know where they live physically? Socially? Within social circles? Who are they hanging out with? Culturally? You don't have to leave America to experience a different culture. What things do their families celebrate? What holidays are important to them? And then mentally, emotionally, what kind of headspace are they in? Where do they live? And then, do you know what I have done? And this is the one that, when Jesus stepped into Zacchaeus' world, Jesus knew what Zacchaeus had done. But he removed his shame by knowing what he had done, but not hanging it over his head. Some people have done some wild things. I know one thing I can confidently say is that none of us have never not sinned, right? We're all sinners saved by grace. The things that we do just all might look different. The things that we have done have just looked different. But sometimes people see where you are today, and they forget that you were once an elementary school student. You were once a middle school student. You were once a high school student navigating the world. You once may have dealt with peer pressure, right? And were annoyed and frustrated by your parents or your caretakers. Sometimes teenagers don't always see that when they see adults. They think that you were born this way, right? And so when my kids, they're like, what? But so, quick story. We got to move on. So, quick story. Do I have time for a quick story? I don't have time for a quick story. I'll tell you a quick story later. So, do you know what I have done? When you respond to a student who has trusted you with this moment, you are the church. And the way that we respond in those moments can either turn them on or turn them off. Of the greater institution of church, of religion, faith, God, all of that. Your response is the capital C, church's response. I had a cousin who got pregnant in not high school. She was like her early 20s, so she had just graduated high school. And there was one person in the church who made her step down from a lot of the different places that she was serving in because she got pregnant out of wedlock. But it was one person. But you know what we say today? Yeah, that church was wild. They made her step down instead of just helping to recognize, hey, maybe she made a mistake. She messed up. But even today, we say that church. But it was just one person. Essentially, when a teenager is asking, do you know what I've done? They're asking, do you think I'll be okay? Do you think I still have value? Are you and I still good, even though you know this? And do you think I can be forgiven? And then this last one is, do you know what I can do? This is still the one that gives me the most chills. It really is. Because it's really inspirational and it's aspirational. And in the way that we praise their achievements and also character development motivates people, period, in order to keep walking forward, right? When we recognize the things that they have done, and it gives us a glimpse into what it is that, when we recognize the things that they have done, the good things and the bad, right? we have the potential to speak life into what it is that they can do. Helps to give them a vision for their lives. But truth in all this is the more personal you are, the more specific you can be with the encouragement that you give. So the more personal you make it, the more specific you can be with the encouragement and the advice that you give. So if you're looking at all your scenarios, right, all of your scenarios, the more personal you make it, the more specific you can be with your encouragement, your advice, your love, your praise, and your support to them all. Because again, back to this, everybody needs someone to see them like Jesus does. You have the potential to be a major character in the story of somebody's life. I love reading autobiographies. I'm always reading somebody's autobiography, always, because I love hearing people's stories, to getting to places that they are, right? And the people that they talk about who are motivating them and encouraging them, you all have the potential to be a character in somebody's story. Is that not good? That, to me, that is like one of those things that, is just so inspirational and encouraging, because anyone can show up and simply say, you can do good, you have value. Anybody can show up and say that you have worth. Anybody can show up. But when it's someone who has stepped into their world and knows them, knows their name, where they live, what they have done, can see their potential and what they can do, when someone who really knows them says you have worth, you have value, you have potential, it means something different, something completely different. So let's take another break, and we'll jump back in with Safe Space. So if you all have, like I said earlier, if you all have any questions or any comments about anything I'm saying, please just feel free to just jump in here. The last part of what we're talking about in session 4, we'll start diving into the scenarios, but I've also heard a few scenarios that people have brought to me too. So we can either talk about some scenarios of your own as we engage in some conversation in session 4, or we can talk about the scenarios that have been presented. I'm totally open to either. But I just want to make sure that we are able to really just have some interactive conversation. I feel like we haven't necessarily had a time for some Q&A or questions or large group conversations. We definitely will plan for that in session 4. But if at any point you feel like you've got something to say within what we're talking about here, feel free to just jump in there, okay? I like to think I'm a little bit more of a relaxed kind of person. So, yeah. So, question for you all. How do you know when a teenager feels safe with you? How do you know? Oh, okay. Say it again. It texts you. Often. Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. They'll seek you out. Yeah, they're willing to share things with you. That's so true. And would you say? Funny. Sometimes those things that they share are memes, right? Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And sometimes they're things that are a bit more deep in their personal life, right? So many thoughts are flooding my head right now. I'm going to try not to go on as many tangents. One of the things that we saw within Zacchaeus' story is that Jesus got close enough to see what was really happening in his life. And if you look at how Jesus modeled relationship, whether it's Mary and Martha, the woman at the well, so many people, the disciples, he got close enough to see what was really happening in their lives. And sometimes when we get close enough to see what's really happening in somebody's life, we might be shocked at what we see. Might be shocked at what it is that we see. And sometimes when you get close enough to see what's happening in somebody's life, real life conversations are going to come up. So a huge part of what we talk about in this session is talking about how to handle the real life conversations that will come up and that could possibly come up. Let's look at a few stats first. 1 in 3, you probably can't see that because I can barely see it and I'm standing right here. 1 in 3 teens report struggling with mental health. 1 in 3 teens. If y'all are at a table of 3 teens, 1, 2, 3, one of you's got it. 61% of teens report that adults in their life do not know how deeply they are struggling with mental health. 52% of those younger than 25 have no trust in organized religion. 1 in 5 teens identify as something other than heterosexual, cisgender. And 5 in 5 teens have a friend or parent or relative who is something other than heterosexual, cisgender. 1 in 5 teens have considered suicide, and 1 in 10 teens have attempted suicide. I need a few volunteers. Let me see how many we need. 1, 2, come on up. 1, 2, 6. 6 people. I need 6 people. Six people. No men. Come on, I need the last 2 to be some brothers. Come on. Got 6 people? Okay, so I want you to hold up. You all have things on papers that might be some hard things to talk about, right? I want you all to put them in order based on the easiest thing to come to an adult with to the hardest thing to come to an adult with. No, you all do it. You all do it. Oh, you can come on. Come on. Hey, come on. It's okay. Go, participate. I don't care. No, I told she was okay. She's okay. I'm open. You can participate too if you want. If you all have opinions, go ahead and chime in. This is easy. Easy is here. Ooh, perspective experience. Ah. That's interesting that you would put that there because some people put it down here. You see? It's all about experience. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Ah, okay. You see that? It's all a matter of perspective and experience in the person. It really all varies. I don't have my clicker.
Yeah, in this situation, I think they talk about that much easier. But school or
But I think an important thing for us to recognize in this exercise is that we all have different experiences with teenagers, right? We all have had our own personal experience, what we perceive would be the hardest thing, right? And then we all all people are different. So the way that I personally probably would put these things, based on my personal experience, would be different than somebody else, right? But what we're going to get to the ultimate idea behind all of this is that there might come a point in a time when someone's going to say, I need to talk to you. Can I tell you something? Or some people will say nothing about these things, and then the list goes on, because this is not an exhaustive list. The list goes on, right? And when these things happen, what do? All right? Thank you all for joining us in this. You all can keep those. Keep them. Put them on your wall, especially the one that says pornography. Put it on your wall. Have everybody asking lots of questions when they come to your house. I'm sorry. I can't help it. Can't help myself sometimes. All right. So, what do you do when a teenager gets the courage to tell you something? First, you watch your face. And this might be something we need to practice in the mirror. My husband tells me that I have like this resting mean face, right? And I'm like, I'm just listening, right? I'm just listening intently. And if I'm listening like really, really intently, then I might zone out as I'm listening, because I'm just start just processing what you're saying in a different kind of way. My face just shows it, So it's important to watch our face. Some of these things that we're going to talk about are really, really just practical things, really just practical tools that you can use. Because, one more thing about watching your face, 90-some% of the things that we perceive about somebody else does not come from the things that they say. It comes from body language, your facial expression. It comes from all of that. So it's important to be mindful of how we're sitting, and our faces that we're making, and what we're doing, because it communicates something to somebody else. Yeah, God bless you. And then have a plan for what you'll say. There's phrases that I keep in my back pocket, and I whip them out like it's a spade, the highest spade in the card game, right? And for a while, there were some phrases that I adopted from some other people until I was able to own and develop my own. But it's important to have a plan for what it is that we'll say. Maybe you could say something like, thank you for telling me. That was really brave. Something you could say. Thank you for telling me. That was really brave. Wow, that must be so hard. And I'm so sorry. I don't know, but we're going to figure it out together. I love you, and nothing you can tell me will change that. Just some phrases that might be helpful in navigating some of this stuff when people get the courage to tell you something that's challenging. But sometimes when someone tells you about something that they might have personally done, it's easy to want to instantly, in that moment, correct their behavior. But there will come a time to correct behavior. There'll be a time to correct behavior. But in the immediate aftermath of someone sharing something that they might have personally done, it might not be the time. Because the reality is, when someone shares something about what it is that they have done, it took a lot of courage. It took a lot of vulnerability. And you need to honor their courage and their vulnerability, and recognize that that conversation will not be the last, because it's potential to not be the last conversation that you have about it. And if you plan on consistently showing up, that conversation should not be the last conversation that you have about it. So what do you do next? Give them time and space to breathe. And I don't mean necessarily time in days, but maybe after, you all have the conversation, give them a little bit of space. But in that moment, it's okay to just sit for a second. There is nothing wrong with a little bit of silence. Just sit for a second. But watch your face while you're sitting, right? You can also talk the immediate next steps. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? Remember we talked about in one of the other phases conversations, we talked about giving people practical steps. What can they do today? What can they do this week? Give them next steps. Set expectations for future conversations. Is it okay if I follow up with you about this? Is it okay if I check back in with you on this? There was a conversation that I had with a young man. This will be a quick story. He talked with me for about an hour after church one day, and I said to him, talking about some things that were going on in his life, and I said to him, I'm going to check in with you on Wednesday. Wednesday came, Wednesday left, and I did not check in with him, not because I didn't think the conversation was important, because I just forgot. I got so caught up in life, and I just forgot. I saw him on that next week when he came back to church, and I saw him, and immediately remembered, oh my gosh, I didn't check in with you. So if you set any kind of expectations for future conversations and you say you're going to do something, we've got to do it. And what tools can you put in place to make sure that you do it? Is it a reminder in your phone? Is it a sticky note on your bathroom mirror with this kid's name and what you need to do? Like, what is it that you need to do in order to make sure that those immediate next steps and the expectations for future conversations can be carried out without them feeling like they took a moment to be vulnerable with you and shared something with you and you didn't hold to your end of the bargain? And then also invite God into the conversation. Invite God into the conversation. That is so essential. You know, but maybe it looks like before you all step away, hey, let's pray. Or do you want to pray? Because some kids might be like, nah, I don't really want to pray. Or maybe it's you personally. Saying their name out loud and praying their name because we learned their name, right? And then the last thing is, have a plan for who else you're going to talk to. Some conversations require you to talk to somebody else. Some of them may not. But some conversations require you to be able to have a conversation with an additional person who might be able to help you to navigate this conversation, because nobody's expecting you to be a perfect person, know how to navigate every situation perfectly. I don't believe, Scott, you don't think that, right? No, you don't expect that. So have a plan. Who is the next person we should talk to about this? Who is the community of support that we can place around this student so that they can have what it is that they personally need, or that their family can have what it is that they need? Maybe, just maybe, that person is their parents. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know what sort of, when we did the question earlier about connected to parents, there's a lot of people who felt disconnected to their parents, right? Some parents have a lot going on. Maybe they may work in a couple of different jobs. Maybe the parents might just have a lot going on personally. Some parents sometimes just have a lot going on. Two things about this. One, parents will always know more about their child than we do. That's one. And they might be able to offer some sort of insight as to what's going on. Two, I'm talking real slow because I forgot what my second thing was. I don't remember. What was I going to say? It's not even on here because it just came to me. Oh, yes, it is. Here it is. When we only reach out to parents when things are going bad in their children's life, then it doesn't really give us credibility with the parents sometimes. It doesn't really let parents know that we see their kid as an amazing person and we see that their child's potential. But if your child says something that was funny, and we have taken the time to reach out to the parents and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know your kid said this. A parent might be like, okay. Or they might be like, oh, man, that's funny. But it helps them to recognize that you appreciate their kid, you see their kid, you think their kid has worth, as opposed to only reaching out if something is going wrong. But in order to do that, we've got to be able to have some sort of a relationship, which I know can be really, really tricky, and it can be hard. Especially in a setting like this where you don't necessarily have the parents in another service in another room at the same time, right? Or parents might, it can be kind of complicated. But being able to have somewhat of a conversation with parents, sometimes it can be helpful. But then there are those moments when you might need to talk to someone more than just a parent about what's going on, because it might be something pertaining to a parent. So this is when we get into the conversation of what we call the 3 hurts. And I'm sure y'all might have heard some of this before. But when a kid or a teenager mentions, hey, something about hurting themselves, being hurt by someone, or hurting someone else, there's an obligation that we have to be able to communicate that to somebody else, because it's a matter of safety at that point. But then the truth is, especially when you get into these teenage years, if you communicate, if a teenager has taken the time to be vulnerable to be vulnerable and share something about what's happening in their life, and then you in turn go and communicate that to somebody else, that can feel to a teenager like you're betraying their trust. It really, really can. But one of the things we have to be careful about when we engage in these conversations with teenagers is we've got to be careful that we don't promise confidentiality. We don't promise confidentiality. We promise that we'll do the wisest thing with the information that they tell us. Sometimes the wisest thing is to just support the child, keep it to ourselves, do nothing. Sometimes the wisest thing is to seek someone else and tell somebody else about something that you've heard. I said that already. Feel like you're breaking their trust. We cannot refuse to own our responsibility as the adult in the conversation. Now, I don't know how old y'all think I am, but I'm probably not as young as you think I am, right? But I don't know when I grew up. I have no idea. And I'm constantly trying to figure out, when did I become the adult in the situation, right? And I think about how I'm raising my own kids and talking to different parents and being a part of teenagers' lives. I'm like, well, when did I become the adult? I just don't really remember exactly when that happened. I mean, it didn't really happen when I went from 17 to 18, because that wasn't really it. But at some point over the years, I became an adult, right? And we cannot refuse to own our responsibility as the adult. And as the adult, if someone has entrusted something with us, sometimes we have got to do something with it. And here's a sample of what you could possibly say, right? This is long. Let me take a picture of it. You don't necessarily have to say it verbatim, but the general idea of this, right? Follow this flow. I believe you. And because I believe you and I take you seriously, I can't keep this to myself. Because I believe you, I can't keep it to myself. Because I'm taking you seriously, I can't keep it to myself. I can't. But what I can do is promise you this. And if we ever say promise, we got to be really, really serious about holding on to this. But what I can do is promise you this. Whatever happens next, and whoever we talk to after this, I'll be right beside you. And you don't have to navigate this alone. Letting them know that you believe them. Letting them know, hey, I can't keep this to myself because I believe you. But I'll walk alongside you in navigating this. Some of you all may have conversations with teenagers that kind of get to this place of these tough conversations. Some of you might not, right? Some of you all might just talk about who won in the game of 9 square, if there's ever a winner. Some of you all might talk about different things that are happening, some memes that you all see that they send you, right? Some of your conversations might look a little bit different based on a competitive game of cornhole. Some of your conversation with teenagers might not necessarily dive into the deep stuff that we're talking about right here. But what you're doing is you're having shared experiences. And shared experiences lay a foundation of trust. That's what they do. So every time you show up, it matters. Every time you sit down and you listen to somebody, it matters. Every time you show up to their life outside of ground zero, it matters. Because it lays a foundation of trust that might just be a bridge of connection that they need one day. They might need that bridge of connection that foundation of trust created. And they might know, hey, I can go to Carolyn. They might know, hey, I've got somebody to call when I need something. I know we've talked about a whole lot in our conversation today, but if you get nothing out of anything that we're talking about, right? If you get nothing out of this, now I know we won't get all of this stuff right every time. We're not, right? We're not going to get all this stuff right. If you get nothing out of this, get this. Keep showing up. Keep showing up. Keep showing up. Because when we keep showing up, we help a teenager not have to navigate things all by themselves. We help them who might be experiencing hard things at home, because parents do argue sometimes. There's friendship drama that happens in their lives. It just is, right? And when these things happen in life and they have questions, where do they go? Do we want them to go there? What to do when? You can look it up on TikTok, Instagram, Google, YouTube. And when they take those questions to those spaces, what happens? They give them recommendations. They don't judge them. They don't shame them. They give them recommendations about things that they could be possibly wanting to know about. Do we want them to ask their friends? Another 14-year-old? Do we want them to start looking it up with their friend? Do we want them to find safety in gaming? Right? And not to say these things are bad, because people need friends. They need community. They need those spaces and those outlets, right? Or do we want them to get lost in their own heads, in their own minds about these things? Because the truth is, we want them to get to this place of joy at the end of their high school experience. We want them to get here. But not just do we want them to get here, we want them to get beyond this moment. And when we keep showing up, we give them the ability to get beyond that moment with greater joy, with a greater sense of peace, more connected to God, a vision for their life, and with a whole bunch of people who are cheering them on and want them to keep seeing them do well, right? I think we're at the end of this session here. The next conversation we're going to be having is about some of these scenarios, okay? Any thoughts? I know we got a break that we're about to jump into right now, but any thoughts, any questions? If you have a question, okay, don't worry, it's okay. Let's take a break. Let's come back here at 11:30.